opens with pawn to e4. We already said it's gonna be the Sicilian defense. c5, knight f3, d6. We have pawn to sorry, what? Knight f3. Wow. d6. We have d4, c captures, knight captures, and knight to f6. Serves me right for actually moving the pieces instead of clicking on the keyboard. Knight to c3 and pawn to a6. We have the Najdorf variation of the Sicilian. And as I often say, you can play any move here. The top move is bishop to g5. The 11th most popular is rook to g1. But here we have pawn to h3, a very popular Adam's attack. We have pawn to e6. Sometimes people just counter it with pawn to h5 because they don't want to face pawn to g4. But this is just inviting pawn to g4, pawn to g5, and the knight will be remaneuvered to e5 or c5, depending on what white plays. So, okay, pawn to g4. Knight f to d7 and bishop to e3. We have pawn to b5 also strikes on the queen side, and queen to d2 preparing castle's queen side. And there are a couple of games where bishop to e7 was played. Marav also plays bishop to b7, and it is now as of move 9 that we have a completely new game. So, okay, pawn to a3, swapping pawn to b4. We have knight to b6, preparing to bring the knight over to c4. Another standard idea, and the neither of you will attack the queen and the dark square bishop, and the white will have to give up the light square bishop. So, castle's queen side. Knight 8 to d7, and now king to b1. Always a nice prophylactic idea. Rook to c1, and now bishop to g5, attacking the queen and also sidestepping a double attack on the queen and the bishop. We have queen to c7 and pawn to f4. Okay, nothing weird happening here. Both pairs playing very quickly, spending only a few minutes, because it's although this is a completely new position, you kind of know the ins and outs of this if you play it. We have pawn to h5. And now g captures on h5, rook captures, and pawn to h4, so stopping the rook from going anywhere. And you can easily attack it with bishop to e2, queen to e2 if needed. We have knight to c4, and now bishop captures on c4. You could also maybe move the queen, but moving the queen might run into some very nasty ideas, like if you play queen e2, knight captures on b2, and already you're in big trouble. So it definitely makes sense to remove the knight from the board. The bishop captures. We have pawn captures. No, not pawn captures, obviously. Queen captures was played, and now rook to h3. You know that that knight on c3 is always in trouble when you play against the Sicilian. So it makes sense to add a defender along the third rank. And now the question is whether or not to play b4. Like I said, this is one of the lines that I'm going to show, because I usually want to play b4, but here if you play it, let's say captures and captures, there's always the problem of the undefended rook. Queen to e2, and now after you move the rook, there's this very nasty knight to d5. And yes, if you play against the Sicilian a lot, you've seen sacrifices on b5, you've seen sacrifices on d5, you've seen sacrifices on f5, pretty much all of them, including a knight, and you cannot capture. If you capture the queen and bishop, just get the job done right away. And if you move the queen, it's not much better. Rook to c3, or if you move it to the a file, then rook to a3, and the queen is either lost or you move it to a7, and then you just play knight to c7 check. The king has no squares, you have to give up the rook, then comes queen to c4, then rook to c8 check. This is total annihilation. So after rook h3, knight to f6 by Watson, and now pawn to f5. Again, if you play against the Sicilian a lot, it's often a question whether to advance the e-pawn or the f-pawn. Sometimes it's the e-pawn, sometimes it's the f-pawn. You cannot know it by heart. You have to really, love playing against the Sicilian, and you will get the hang of it. But here, pawn to e5 would be better. Point being that after pawn to e5, Watson's position is already really bad, because let's say d captures on e5, all of a sudden knight d captures on b5. Again, a very standard sacrifice, but if you capture it, then bishop captures on f6, and look at this, nothing is defending checkmate here. So you're not in time to recapture, you have to somehow defend. Let's say play queen to d4, rook to d3, and here you just resign. Nothing to be done here. So e5 definitely better here. E5, but pawn to f5 was played, which is still fine, and Andres still has a better position. But now pawn to e5 attacks the knight, and bishop captures an f6. Very nicely done. G captures, we have knight to b3, and now pawn to b4. Finally, Bosled lances it. A captures, and now bishop captures an e4, and you have this really weird position where, okay, the decision on the clock is as it is. Andres has a bit less time, but still an hour on the clock. You do have time, and best would be to capture an e4, and after captures, let's say queen captures, you bring the rook to c3. It's not easy for black to find moves. You have to play something like queen to a8, and then a white can easily consolidate. You just bring the queen here, you defend the 2 pawns, and it's a nice position. Black might capture it, sort of ruin your pawn structure, but it's nothing really. White is much better here. So after bishop captures an e4, you should capture it, but knight to a5 was played, and this now really brings Chucky back into the game. Queen captures on b4. We have queen to e2, yes, attacking the rook here, but now bishop captures on f5. It's a tricky move that he might have missed, although I don't think he missed bishop captures on f5. I think he missed something else, and that is the move that you guys will have to find. Queen captures on h5 was played, even though other moves aren't really better. Your rook is saying, let's say you play rook to e3, all of a sudden rook b8 threatens mate, and once the knight retreats to c4 to defend against checkmate, now you capture on h4. Threatening to capture and then checkmate on b2, so you're gonna have to play knights to e4. But now you start trading. Rook captures, bishop captures, queen captures, and rook to c8. And, okay, whatever white plays, it's lost something like b3 defending the knight, all of a sudden f5. And yes, you can still defend the knight, but rook captures and c4, queen captures, and this is completely winning for black. White's pawn structure is non-existent. It's 5 versus 2. Yes, it's a rook against the bishop, but it's a passed a-pawn. It's a passed e-pawn past f-pawn, and okay, you can maybe attack it, but you can never reach the base of the pawn chain. So this is too easy to play. So after bishop captures on f5, queen captures on h5 was played, thinking, okay, yes, my rook is hanging, my knight is hanging, but obviously I can defend everything except one move. There is one move that completely really destroys white, and it's not easy to spot if you're just looking, to gobble up something. So feel free to pause the video and try to find this elusive idea that Andres missed, but Chucky found while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on the not being greedy. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it is bishop to g4. This is what Owasso played, and now look at this. The knight is hanging, the rook is hanging, the knight is hanging, the rook is hanging, the other rook is hanging, the queen is hanging, and also the b-pawn is pinned, so also rook captures on c3 might be an idea if the rook from h3 moves. What can you even play here? Whatever you play doesn't really work, and the best of all is that it completely logs the queen out of the game. You cannot remain on the 5th rank. This is covered. You can't go down the board. You can only go up the board. So queen to h8 was played, okay, pinning the bishop. But now bishop captures on h3, which is much better than if you just captured on h3 right away. I will show you in case you guys, don't believe me. But if instead of bishop g4 you just capture the rook right away, look at this, knight d5 attacks the queen. Queen captures on a5, and now knight captures on f6, and you're not losing this, but you're not winning it either. For example, king e7, knights to d5 check, and now if you don't want to allow the queen captures, you can either go back and then allow another check, or you go to e6, but then you run into knight f4 check, and you cannot capture because the queen on a5 is undefended, and now after king moves, you capture on h3, win back your material, and now it's just a draw. So that's the problem. So that's why bishop to g4 is key here. We have queen to h8, and now bishop captures on h3. We have knight to b3, as the knight on a5 is also hanging. But now bishop back to e6, threatening to just start capturing pieces here. Queen captures on f6, and now even pawn to a5, preparing pawn a4, pawn a3. And of course, checkmating the white king. We have knight to a2 attacking the queen. Queen to e4 now putting pressure on that c2 pawn. And okay, you can maybe still hold on with knight to a1, but look at those knights. Those are very, very sad knights. So instead, knight to c3 was played, saying you cannot capture on b3, even though this c-pawn is pinned because your queen is hanging. But that's just it. You just remove the attacker of the queen, and then you're free to capture on b3. So rook captures on c3, b captures, and bishop captures on b3. Now threatening queen captures on c2, followed by queen to a2 checkmate. We have queen to f2, defending the c2 pawn, but now, okay, any move wins here, really for Vassal. You can simply play a4 or any other move, but Vassal plays the strongest move recommended by the engine, queen to a4. He sacrifices the bishop on b3, and he was in this position on move 32 that Andres Rodriguez Vila resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. Checkmate is being threatened. The only way to defend is to capture the bishop, but that does not make your day any better. Queen captures on b3, and now you have to defend the rook, so king to c1, and now the bishop that's really just been sitting there for the entire game is the key attacker. Bishop to h6 check, rook to d2, queen captures with check, attacking the rook, king to d1, and you don't have to look for checkmate or anything, you just trade everything and go into a winning king and pawn endgame, where it's 4 pawns versus 1, and you can win this any way you like. Of course, the black king is well within the square of the pawn, so you don't even have to worry about it. King f8, and you can stop the pawn easily.